Okay, let's have your attention. We'll get underway here. For those of you who think you may be wanting to go with us to Israel in February, I don't have brochures yet, but we're close. I have the basic information you need. We're looking at February 7 and coming home on the 17th. This is a Monday. This is a Thursday. Okay. All right. Lisa Whited, member of our church, and World Travel are the ones who are going to be handling it for us. My experience when we signed on our very first trip to Europe with TWA, we discovered that every day at noon they would say, all right, everybody find something to eat and be back in an hour and a half. And there were so many people, they didn't speak Italian, they didn't speak German, they didn't speak French, and so they were lost. That's not the problem in Israel, though Hebrew is the official language. Virtually everybody you see will speak English. But I still found that most of the time when you just say to people, okay, you have an hour and a half to go eat and be back on this corner, they were just, So I insisted that we feed 3 meals a day, all together. The meals will be ready when we arrive. We also discovered that when we got to Rome on our very first trip, and the brochure said, today we arrive at the beautiful city of Rome, where the Colosseum is, and the Vatican, and the Sistine Chapel, and so on. They got us to the hotel. Well, when do we go see all these sites? Oh, that's an extra $55 a piece. All right, so we have this trip set up. It includes all meals, starting with an Israeli big breakfast buffet. Those of you who've been know that Israelis eat a lot of green vegetables and stuff at breakfast, slices of tomatoes and cucumbers and so on. But it still is a big, big spread. You can find, I think, virtually anything you want. We'll have lunch together. We'll have dinner together. Everything that's mentioned in the brochure, if it has an entry fee, it's included. I guarantee you, every entry fee is included. In the past, I tried to administer a tip fund, and I found 2 or 3 times that guides chased me in the airport saying, did I not do a good job? So I said, we're not going to do that. We're going to include tips in the price, and they're paid up front. I'm not going to administer the tips, and I'm not having guides chase me in the airport asking me for more money. So that's included. The only thing that should be extra for you is if you want an ice cream cone in the middle of the morning or the middle of the afternoon if we stop somewhere. Literally, that should be all. You do not need to change money into the Israeli currency unless you just want some souvenirs. They will accept American dollars anywhere. You can buy ice cream, you can buy a soft drink, a cup of coffee with your American money. If you want to buy something more substantial, a souvenir, they'll take credit cards everywhere. If you've got an American credit card, they will be glad to take that. If you see something made out of olive wood or something you want, they'll be glad to take your credit card. So please don't do what we had one year. We got right up on the top of the Mount of Olives, where you're looking at the 2 mosques where once the temple stood. And one of our older ladies was trying to buy, they sell 10 postcards for $1. And she was waving around a $100 bill. So, of course, one of those kids grabbed her $100 bill and started running. So you're safe. They will see to it that you're safe. If you haven't been to Israel before, you'll be surprised to see how many people are carrying automatic weapons on their shoulders who are watching after you. And I think I have a brochure that World Travel sent me saying that statistically, you will be safer anywhere they take you in Israel than you are on the streets of New York or Chicago, probably Tulsa. But so I really believe you will be safe. But think. Don't wave $100 bills in front of little kids who don't have 50 cents, because the temptation may be too big for them. We'll have meetings, at least a long meeting, to try to answer any and all of your questions before we go. Okay, I know price is important to you, so I'm telling you that as far as Lisa and I can determine, everything will be covered except if you want a mid-morning, mid-afternoon snack of some sort. $35.95 is the price. Okay. Now, the jet that flies from Tulsa to Newark for Continental is one of the smaller jets. And so at this date, they would only let us set aside for a group 30 seats. If we should have more than 30, then they will wait list any over 30, and chances are that we can get you on. If not, any past 30 would have to fly to Houston with Continental and then to Newark. So you'd have one extra plane ride if you're not in the first 30. But I don't have brochures yet. I'm just trying to keep you posted as we go along, helping you have as much information as I have. But Lisa sent me one copy of an itinerary, and I made 2 or 3 changes to it. And so she was going to incorporate those and get me back another copy before it actually goes to the printer, because I want to be sure that we're going to see what I think you would like to see and what would be most helpful for you to see. Okay. All right. I know we've just been through buying shares, stock in our youth. Normally in February, we have a campaign called Lights On for Cookson. You know that Mary Whitaker is a United Methodist missionary who's given nearly 30 years of her life here in Oklahoma, though she's not an Oklahoman, down in Cookson, among some of the poorest, economically poorest people in our state. Years ago, some of our people who were doing volunteer work for Mary asked, "What is your greatest need?" And at that point she said, "If I ask for 3 more softballs, some church Sunday school class will give me that. If I need 2 more bats, if I need, those kinds of things, a basketball or 2, they're not hard to come by. Where I have problems is paying the electric bill." And so at that point, right after Christmas time is usually a time that she has a financial crunch, and we started a program at Boston Avenue called Lights On for Cookson. This year, we were just ready to launch that campaign when the earthquake hit Haiti. And that was such a catastrophic thing that all the bishops of the Methodist Church were asking Methodists to send in their money immediately. We already had people on the ground. In fact, you may recall 2 United Methodist executives with our United Methodist Committee on Relief were already in Haiti on another project and were killed in one of the hotels. So we had Methodists already on the ground, and we got others there almost immediately. One of them, I told you in a sermon, granddaughter of a former pastor here, Finus Crutchfield. Her father is now the bishop in Arkansas, Charles Crutchfield. And their daughter Melissa is a very capable young woman, Duke University grad, who went to work for the United Methodist Committee on Relief some years ago. Melissa's probably mid-30s now or so, and she's been on the ground there for months. So anyway, we didn't do Lights On for Cookson because we were doing special offering for Haiti, and we didn't want to just overpower you. The bishop, our bishop, is taking offerings this week at the annual conference for Cookson Hills and for more gifts to buy nets to put over kids while they sleep in Africa so mosquitoes don't bite them and they don't get malaria. So one is going to be nothing but nets, the other is going to be Cookson, but we can designate. And so any monies that you might want to put in the envelope for Lights On for Cookson, we will put in the offering plate this week at conference, but it will be specifically stated goes for Cookson Hills. The bishop has told us we can do that, and it'll be so honored. So just pass it around as we go through the lesson. I know you've recently given for other things. Don't feel obligated, but if you want to put something in the envelope, fine. We'll be sure that it gets where it needs to go. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about the trip at this point? I know that Lisa will be handling all the finances, Lisa Whited, and the brochure will tell you how to contact her. It's a $500 deposit that has to be paid, and then I think it's either 60 days or 90 days before the balance. I think it's 60 days is what she said. The balance would be paid, but $500 holds a seat and a reservation. We will stay in 3 different hotels during this 10-day period. We spend the first night in Tel Aviv, actually right near the beach there at Tel Aviv, because that's where the airport is, and you'll be exhausted by the time we get there. But we will spend one night in Tel Aviv, and then we move up the coast, Caesarea, on up to Carmel, and across to the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias is a sister city to Tulsa. It is the major place on the lake, and we will stay in Tiberias 3 nights and do sightseeing there. And then first time we went, the way the trip was set up, we went first to Jerusalem, and I thought that was all backwards. So we don't do it that way anymore. We save Jerusalem till the last. That's where Jesus' life ended. That's where he was raised. We want to end in Jerusalem. So 1 night in Tel Aviv, 3 nights up on the lake in Tiberias, and the rest of the time in Jerusalem. Okay. Huh? The question was about the weather. I've told you that Israel, particularly the hill country, gets all of its rainfall in 5 months, and then it doesn't rain for 7 months. That's the norm for them. I talked to some people who had been to Israel in February, and they said that you may have rain, but the temperatures should be much better. At nighttime maybe 50, and in the daytime upper 60s to 70 degrees. That's what we're hoping for. It's been 110 when I've been there, and so I'm really hoping for 70 or 65. I'd go for 50 over 110. I would go for 50 degrees. So we'll get even better data for you when we get closer. Occasionally, every 15 or 20 years, sort of like Houston, they get a dusting of snow in Jerusalem. But that's very unusual for them. Usually not that cold. So the winters there are more like Houston would be. It might be 50 degrees at night and 65 to 70 in the daytime is what we're hoping for. Okay. All right, let's get on with our study here. We're in the book of Ruth. If you'll open your Bibles to the book of Ruth, and we'll get started right after we pray. God, we thank you for this book of yours and all those who try to help us understand it. We thank you for your Holy Spirit that wants us to understand this book and stands ready to help us. So we lean on the best scholars we know and also count on you to help us look for those things that are forever true about your book. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. All right, let me remind you where we left off at the book of Judges. We'll do it very quickly, and then we'll move right on in the book of Ruth. I read several verses with you from the last few chapters of Judges, all of which said almost exactly the same thing. At that time, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Remember? At that time. So the Judges is being written a long time later, looking back to that 200-year period, 200 years, during which time the 12 tribes, descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob, lived as an amphictyony. I wrote that word for you, a loose confederation of tribes. They were frightened of kings after being dominated by kings for 400 years in Egypt. But after 200 years, they've forgotten how bad kings are. And so they're starting to clamor for a king. But before we get into that clamoring for a king, there is a little book here of just 4 chapters that becomes very important because it paves the way, gives us a little genealogy of the greatest king they ever had. That was David. The bishop's preaching today about Solomon. And of course the Bible has much good to say about Solomon as well. But it was called forever after the house of David, the house of David, the throne of David. So Ruth is significant because David is a direct descendant. Now last Sunday we began with just the first 5 verses. So I remind you about how that was going. Okay. The people of Moab live just on the east side of the Jordan. By the way, if you're trying to sort of get this into perspective, Tel Aviv is right over near the beach. Okay, so right over near the Mediterranean. And Jerusalem is about 35, 40 miles. You have to go up into the hills from Tel Aviv. But rather than going this way, we go over to and slightly up the coast to Caesarea, where Pontius Pilate lived. And they actually have found a stele of that period engraved during the time of Pontius Pilate. The original is now in the museum in Jerusalem, but there is a model of, a casting of here, the Roman theater and so on, in Caesarea. And then we go on up to Carmel, then we cross over like this. And Tiberias is right where the 9 would be if this were the face of a clock. Tiberias is right there. Nazareth is about 20 miles away, about 20 miles from there. Okay, roughly 50 miles from the Mediterranean to the Jordan. So, Naomi and her husband lived on the west bank of the Jordan. There was a drought which ushered in famine. And so they took their 2 sons and moved over to Moab. And if you take your sons somewhere else when they're marrying age, chances are they're going to marry. And they married Moabite women. And then the husband of Naomi died, and then the 2 sons of Naomi died, and she ends up a widow woman with 2 daughters-in-law. And she says to them, I have no more sons to give you, so go back to your people. And one of them, Orpah, decides she will, and the other says, I'm not leaving you. When I married your son, I married into your family, and where you go, I'm going. That's where we're picking up, verse 6. Then she, antecedent for the pronoun here is Naomi. Then Naomi started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that Yahweh, this is the name given at the burning bush, the I am who I am, had considered his people and given them food. What she means is she's heard it's raining again on the west side of the river. It's raining again, so the wheat's growing and there's something to eat. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. Right? Judah, one of the 12 tribes. And Judah being the tribe whose land included Naomi's hometown, Bethlehem. Okay, includes Bethlehem. And Bethlehem, remember, was about 5 miles from the old walled city of Jerusalem. Today the suburbs of Jerusalem just go right on out to Bethlehem. But there's a very high security wall and fence there. And as I told you, to go to Bethlehem, you have to get off the Israeli bus and go through the checkpoint and get on a Palestinian bus and go on into Bethlehem. Okay. Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May Yahweh deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Yahweh grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Answer, no, I don't even have a husband now. Turn back, my daughters. Go your way. I'm too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you wait until they were grown to be your husbands? She's trying to show them how futile it is to go with her. Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It's been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of Yahweh has turned against me. That's a sad line. Yahweh is the one of chesed, steadfast love. Naomi says, God has turned against me. He let my husband die. He let both of my sons die. So they wept aloud again. Every time she makes a little speech, the girls cry. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her Elohim. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I go. That's what it literally says in Hebrew. Where you go, I go. Where you lodge, I lodge. And it literally says, where you pitch tent, I pitch tent. Your people, my people. Your Elohim, my Elohim. Where you die, I die. And there I will be buried. It's very important to people to be buried among their own. Ruth says, I'm in this all the way. I will be buried where you will be buried. I'm going with you. May Yahweh, and she uses the name of Naomi's God, do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you. Now, when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. She throws up her hands and starts walking, and Ruth's trailing along behind. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. Again, just outside Jerusalem, but Jerusalem right now is a very small little place owned by the people called Jebusites at this point. David will take that land, but not now. Not yet. When they came to Bethlehem, remember, this is where Rachel had died. Favored wife of Jacob, bore two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. In Israel, they say Benjamin. Benjamin, while she was giving birth to Benjamin, she died. And they buried her at this little place called Bethlehem. The house of bread. The house of bread. Bet is house. Okay. The whole town was stirred because of them. The women said, is this Naomi? She's been gone for years. The sons were married for about 10 years, it says. And they didn't marry immediately, so she's been gone a long time. People age. Is this Naomi? She said to them, call me no longer Naomi. She has a really bad attitude, you have to understand. She's got a bad attitude. Call me Mara, for the Almighty One has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, having husband and two sons, but Yahweh has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when Yahweh has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned together with Ruth, the Moabite. Jews, Israelites, didn't usually get along with Moabites. Her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab, they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Chapter 2. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor. She said to her, go, my daughter. Remember the law was, we read this in Torah when we went through those first 5 scrolls, that people who had more were supposed to care for those who had less, and one of the ways they were to care for them was to be sure that when they gathered the grain, they didn't rake up every little bit. If the poor were willing to get out there and scrounge for what was left, they should have it. Leave some for the poor. That's what Ruth is proposing to go gather up. So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. She's just picking up what's left over. As it happened, now, when you read the Bible, And a storyteller says, now, as it happened, you know something else important's about to go on. So you see people leaning in around the campfire as these stories were told generation after generation. Now, as it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to the rich man Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz, wouldn't you know it, just at that moment, Boaz happens to come by from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, Yahweh be with you. And they answered, Yahweh bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, to whom does that young woman belong? The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, and this is a sort of racist comment here, she's that Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, she must have overheard the conversation, please, let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She wasn't going ahead, not even joining in with them, just trailing along behind. So she came, and she's been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting, even for a moment. Wow, this is a woman who works really hard all day in the field. So Boaz speaks to her. He said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I've ordered the young men not to bother you. I mean, bad things happen to young women sometimes if they got caught off away from other women, only men around. Stay close to the women. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. Drink with my workers. Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him what she had said to Naomi earlier in the morning. I think I'll go glean. Perhaps I will find favor with someone. This word for finding favor, you see, later becomes a word that we know as grace. Grace is finding favor in the eyes of God. Maybe somebody will be gracious, merciful. So Ruth responds, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner? Now, as we've gone through and as we go farther through the Hebrew Scriptures, you'll remember that there are times when the Hebrews intermarry quite freely with other tribal groups. And there are other times when one prophet or another will say, do not fraternize with women of other tribes. And what we discover, of course, is that when there is a threat, you circle the wagons and try to take care of your own, and you don't let others in. So look at how America has treated folks who cross the border, undocumented, and how now some states are beginning to treat them differently. I'm not taking a side, which is right, which is wrong. I'm saying attitudes change. We were in Germany a year ago. The Germans thought it was great to bring all these Turks into their country to do labor, grunt work they didn't want to do. And now there are so many Turks in Germany who want to build mosques and live the Muslim lifestyle and so on. It's become a problem. And so they're reconsidering. In this beautiful country of Switzerland, they had a big vote just this spring. Would they allow mosque or not mosque? Minarets and people calling others to prayer or not minarets? They voted none. None. We were in the Netherlands. It's considered one of the more liberal countries in Europe. We were doing the trains there. And a woman who agreed to give us a little ride from what we thought was the museum we wanted to see, wrong place. She said, well, I'm going past the one you want. Ride with me. And we rode with her. And she said, we brought all these people up from northern Africa to do work we didn't want to do, and now they're building mosques and minarets, and we're getting frightened. Okay? So, with the Israelites, there were times when Foreigners were okay. Marrying foreigners okay. Other times when they circled the wagons and were afraid of mixed bloods. Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and your mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord, may the I am who I am, Israel's God, reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I'm not one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here, eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine," sort of a vinegar. This is not done, folks. Rich people don't invite foreign gleaners to come and dip in their bowl. So people who were hearing this story would go, "Oh, wow, Boaz has more in mind here than he's letting on." So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her. Not a little bit, a whole bunch. He heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she even had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves. Don't make her wait for what's left over. Do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles and leave them for her to glean. Do not rebuke her. Leave more. Leave more for this one." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. They had to flail these stalks around until the grains would come loose. And it was about an ephah of barley, a little bushel she's gathered up of real grain that day. She picked it up and came into the town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. So Naomi eats all she wants and then gives what's left over to Ruth. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? Where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the I am who I am, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." By George, Naomi says, God has not abandoned us. Finally, some credit here where credit is due. God is looking after us. I didn't realize it. Naomi also said to her, and here's the rest of the story, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, she continues the storyteller, keeps reminding you, she's not one of us. She's not one of us. And yet this story becomes a part of Hebrew Scripture because David, will become in the lineage of David. He even said to her, "Stay close by my servants until I finished all my harvest." Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field. You're not always safe in somebody else's field. Stick close to Boaz. He's looking after you." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. End of the chapter. Don't go to bed. Turn the page. This is a page turner. Huh? Oh my, what happens next? Well, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you." And remember, for things to be well with you, well-being is the word shalom. So that you may have shalom. Okay? Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself. Okay? Scrub yourself down, put on a little perfume, put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Just sort of stay back and watch. When he lies down, after he's worked, and has now had supper, and has had wine, and is gone to bed, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. She said to her, we've got so many pronouns here. Ruth says back to Naomi, all that you tell me, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. Implication here, he went to sleep. She snuggles up next to him. At midnight, the man was startled, turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. He said, "Who are you? It's the middle of the night. Who are you?" And she answered, "I'm Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." What does that mean? Okay. The Torah is very clear that people who have no land are destitute. People who have no land are destitute. Naomi, her husband, 2 sons, left their land because of a famine and went to Moab. And they come back and somebody else is working their land, living on their land. It falls to the next of kin to make things right. So Naomi has explained all this to Ruth, and Ruth knows to say the right words. She's been taught. Don't worry about it. Just spread the cloak back over me. I'm your next of kin. He said, "May you be blessed by Yahweh, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men." Implication here is he's an older man. He didn't go chasing after all those young bucks, whether poor or rich. "And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman." She's not been chasing after these young men, not throwing herself at them. She's been very faithful to her mother-in-law, Naomi. "But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. I'm kin, but I'm not next of kin. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as Yahweh lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another. That means it's still dark. While it's still dark, he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." There would be whisperings about what had happened all night if people saw her leaving the floor where Boaz had slept all night. So she's up before daylight. He said, "Bring the cloak you're wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back, on her shoulders, so she could carry it. Then he went into the city. He's going to go do what he said. He's going to go seek out this next of kin. So she came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me this 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" And she replied, Naomi replied, Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Turn the page. Story goes on. So everybody's huddled around the fire. And what happened next? Well, no sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate. Now remember, all the towns were walled, because marauding bands went around at night time. And if you could get inside a walled portion of your village or city, lock the gates, you could sleep, feeling pretty secure about things. When you go to the old walled city of Jerusalem, you will be told this is the Damascus gate. This is the gate to Caesarea. And what that simply means is, what we would say here is, oh, that's the Bartlesville Highway. Oh, that's the Stillwater Highway. That's the Oklahoma City Turnpike or whatever. That's all they mean. There was a gate that had a road going out from it to a certain destination. At the gate of the city, people came and went. And it was there that you could get a quorum and decide important matters. So Boaz has gone from his field and the threshing floor to the gate of the city. He sat down there. No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin of whom Boaz had spoken came passing by. So Boaz said, "Come over, friend, sit down here." And he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. And what he's done is he has a quorum. In Judaism, to have a proper service, you need 10 men. That was the old law. You need 10 men. He's got them. And he's got this brother right where he wants him with 10 reliable witnesses. So they sat down. Boaz then said to the next of kin, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of the land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it," and here the word redeem in spiritual matters means the same as it does in money matters, buy back. It means to buy back. We've got to get Elimelech's land bought back so that Naomi and Ruth are not destitute. Okay. And you're the next of kin. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, so that I may know, for there is no one prior to you to redeem it. You're next in line, and I come after you. So he said, "I will redeem it." Oh no, that's not what Boaz thought he would say. Then Boaz said, "The day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring that Moabite woman." You got to understand, there's a little bargain here. You get a Moabite woman, the widow of the dead men, to maintain the dead men's name on his inheritance. So in other words, you're not just buying it back for Naomi so that she has something for the rest of her life. Guess what? She's got a daughter-in-law and she's going to inherit after her. I just want you to be aware what you're signing on for here. So at this, the next of kin said, "I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." So Boaz wants to get this settled. Either the other man's going to do it or he's going to do it, and these 10 witnesses will forever swear, however it turns out. So when the man first says, "Okay, I'll do it for Naomi," well, you also get that Moabite woman. "Oh no, I can't do that." Verse 7. "Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. One took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel." So when the next of kin said to Boaz, "Acquire it for yourself," he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, these 10 he's gathered up there, "Today you are witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon, I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, We are witnesses. May Yahweh make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. Okay, the two wives of Jacob. Two wives of Jacob. And here they're given credit not only for the sons they birthed, but for offering up their handmaids, each one a handmaid, you recall, to Jacob so that he could make more sons. Here, this author, storyteller, gives the two sisters credit for all 12 children of Jacob, all 12 sons. That's what's happening here. Okay. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. But it produced 12 sons. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And every Christmas, when we read just before Mary comes into the sanctuary, we read, And you, O Bethlehem in Ephrathah. You remember? The minister has to read that always says, that's a tongue twister. Yeah, it is. Okay. Oh, you from Bethlehem in Ephrathah. So, Joseph of the house and lineage of David went to Bethlehem. Okay. And through the children that Yahweh will give you by this young woman, here's an old man who has another chance with a younger woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, meaning the lineage has continued from Jacob right on down. So, here's the kicker to the whole story. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, Yahweh made her conceive. Children are considered in Israel a gift of God, and she bore a son. Then the women, I see the music men, pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little. Okay, that's what they're doing again. Is that Naomi? Is that Naomi? Wow, she looks old. She's been away a long time, Well, now she has a grandchild. And so, pick a little, talk a little, the women are still talking. They said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you, this baby, a restorer of life, a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Wow, this is almost a feminist story, is it not? I mean, in a day when sons were cherished, this daughter-in-law of yours is worth more than 7 sons. And 7 represent wholeness, fullness, completeness. You couldn't have done better, Naomi, than this young woman, this Moabite woman. Okay. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom, hugged him close to her, and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. A Moabite woman, great-grandmother of the king to be. Now these are the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Amminadab, Amminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, Jesse of David. End of story. And I've told you that professors of literature say that this is the way a short story ought to be told. That it's brilliant. It's brilliantly told. Jonah is another story, wonderfully told when you see all the nuances, and I've mentioned just a few, of the nuances of the Hebrew language and how the storyteller kept everybody huddled around the fire to tell them this story. This young Moabite woman who got grafted, as we other Gentiles later would be, onto the root of Jesse and King David. We are the wild branch grafted into the stump of Judaism. It's a wonderful story. All right, we left Judges with several verses here saying, as yet there was no king in Israel. Everybody did what was right in his or her own eyes. Over and over and over. So now we have a preamble, if you would. The story that's going to tell us about when kings came to Israel. Okay, I have just a couple more minutes. Let me say something else to you. I may mention this in a sermon, probably will. Our bishop is going with a large group this summer in August to Oberammergau. You know that every 10 years, the little village of Oberammergau, it's about the size of my hometown. It has about 6,000 people. Oberammergau, it's a beautiful little town, and a very modest little town, 9 years in a row. And then the 10th year they do the Passion Play because they promised God way back there during the Great Plague in the 1600s that if He would spare their little village, they would do tribute to Him by doing this elaborate play of the life of Christ every 10th year. All right, so it's up again. For years, the 10th year didn't fall on an even number. And a few years ago, they decided everybody can remember better. We put it on an even number, so now it's 2010. What I've been interested in for years and years is how gradually the script has changed. As recently as 1984, 40 years after the Holocaust, they were still portraying the Jewish priest with horns. And all the followers of Jesus were Christians, not Jews. All Jews were bad. And a very dramatic moment, the Jewish leader cries out in the play, "May all of this fall on our heads forever and ever for surrendering Him into the hands of the Roman authorities," and so on. Well, it's taken 60 years after the Holocaust, 65 years for them finally to change the script. And for them to finally realize that the first followers of Jesus were not Christians, they were Jews. And that Jesus was not fighting all the Jews. Certainly not all the Jews were fighting Jesus. It was between Him and those who were running things at the temple in Jerusalem. And one thing that's helped them is the abuses of the Roman Catholic Church. They've had a major scandal in Germany this year about old stories coming out about priests who abused little boys in Germany, and at a time when the present Pope was an archbishop there, and trying to link, did he perpetuate these priests? And they're saying he knew nothing about that. He knew nothing about that. But it's been a big scandal. And when we were in France in April, this was on CNN Europe night after night. So gradually the folks in Oberammergau have come to realize, those who have the power often abuse power. And it came to one of their own in Martin Luther to rebel against that kind of power 500 years ago. So that's what Jesus was doing, huh? So the Jewish priests will no longer have horns this year. They haven't done that since 84 at least. And the lines about "may this be on our heads forever and ever" has been taken out. Jesus wears a yarmulke, and he and his followers light the menorah, and it's depicted much more cleanly from what I read that Jesus was having issues with the power in Jerusalem but that all those first followers of his were Jews, as he was. I'm eager to see how it'll play out. The bishop's going in August, and I was already talking to him about it last night. Bishop, did you know that as recently as 1984, they were still having the Jewish priests wear horns? No, he didn't know that, so I was telling him about that. We'll see his reaction when he gets back in August. All right, if you haven't been to church, don't rush off. The bishop's terrific. You're going to enjoy it.